I'd had a conversation with who we are going to call Anna as an alias name to conceal her identity. And she had told me this story from her life. And we have been in the studio bringing that text to life through movement and through dance to shine a light on relationships and dysfunctional relationships and this concept of psychological abuse in relationships and how that can be very hard to identify, but we don't necessarily have the language or the tools or the representation outside of ourselves to be able to say, oh, I can recognize that this isn't good, and if I'm not able to solve it, I can leave. I don't have to wait until things get absolutely catastrophic and I'm totally broken.
The beginning of the story is that she is with her biological family. It's a bit of a abusive relationship. So she finds that at one day it gets too much for her and she has to leave home, which is already terrifying enough, and a lot of us can probably relate to that, but it's also a very just frightening position that she was put in to begin with.
She was working for this woman named Sandra who had known, some of her siblings and felt deeply connected to her for whatever reason, and seemed to be a person that Anna could rely on and confide in, and also took notice of the fact that Anna was experiencing abuse in her home, and I feel was really the first person to offer her a way out or an alternative.
And Sandra was willing enough to let her stay for one night. That turned into a couple months. Fast forward, she's staying with her. I think she stayed with her for a year.
And they sort of developed this really close, a very child-parent relationship. Anna was also dealing with massive amounts of trauma, and had been diagnosed with PTSD at one point, and had a concussion and had a migraine disorder, and was dealing with all of these physical and emotional health issues. Sandra was a person that was able to offer her access to treatment and support as well.
However, that relationship that sort of kicked off this beautiful journey for Anna of healing ended up quite tense with the COVID lockdowns and the mixture. Anna and Sandra were not only working together 40 hours a week, but they were also living together, and they were also friends. And so all of that at once kind of resulted in this tension.
And their relationship started to really suffer and crumble and became really complicated and lacked boundaries in ways that I think both Anna and Sandra really needed, but specifically Anna, she was going through this massive healing journey.
This incredible support system that Sandra had set up for Anna, essentially, to help her heal and to help her deal with this PTSD and migraine disorder. She then stripped away quite fast, quite unexpectedly, without any warning, forcing her to move out very fast, cutting off her access to any sort of money, and paying off a car and having her be responsible for a car, and eventually firing her from work after she had to take sick leave, understandably, and eventually pushing her out in this weird, confusing space of this woman who is expressing and communicating and saying over and over again that, I'm your mom, I still love you, all these things. But at the same time, you no longer have a roof over your head.
A lot of Anna's story was just about disintegration or the crumbling of their relationship, and what she has learned from the fact that this relationship no longer exists, and the ways that she was harmed by this person, but also the things that she has learned after coming out of such a tumultuous time with a person who was kind of a parent to her.
Some of the major kind of themes that have been bubbling up are definitely relationship, and just how complex relationships are, how we need them, how they, unattended can so easily go awry, and the work that has to be put into mend relationships or mend oneself from a bad relationship.
There are so many rules, I guess, that are taught, and a lot of models that are shown about this is what relationships look like, and this is what families look like, and this is what friendships look like, and they're all I think a lot of people right now are figuring out that relationships can appear in very different ways, and family can exist in all of these various different ways. I think also a big thing is boundaries or lack of boundaries. When are we taught what those look like, and how do we enforce those in relationships in a way that is loving and healthy? I think mental health is obviously a huge overarching theme in this piece, and the various ways that your mind is dealing with so much and trying to process so much.
The idea of suffering in silence. So many people struggle with mental health and they suffer with mental health, but they suffer alone. This idea of creating this persona to conceal the pain that you're feeling and all of the horrible things that are going on around you, to, I don't know, numb yourself and make you think that everything's okay.
The power of telling your story. I used to think about that just in terms of how it could help other people, but also how it helps you.
You hear her talk about her story and you see such a positive and radiant young woman, and you're oh my God, you went through so much, but she was so resilient.
We've all found that the dance has been quite incredible to really feel and communicate that emotional experience and the emotional knowledge that comes from that in a way that words just can't. We can talk about it, we can explain it, but to actually feel it, to really thoroughly understand what Anna went through, and the knowledge and wonderful takeaways from that story that Anna's offering all of us in telling her story in this way is quite moving and quite visceral and quite